What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another PFF podcast short. I'm Mike Renner. Joining me is our linebacker scout this year, Josh Liskowitz. We're talking about Alabama linebacker Reuben Foster. So break it down for me, Josh. How good is he?
He is #good. He is that good.
That's good.
It's very good. Let me start off by saying this about him. When you consider what he can do in all three phases of defense, run defense, pass rush, and coverage, his athleticism that shows up on film, it's going to show up whenever you look at it, testing, whenever that does happen. If you take off the off the field problems, obviously that erupted through the combine. We'll get into that later. If you take out the shoulder issues that he has, so the injury concerns that we don't really have much information about, I think he's probably the number 2 overall player in this entire draft. I would seriously, if none of that mattered to me and I was San Francisco, that would be my guy. I think he's that skilled at every phase.
Truthfully, the more I watch him, the more I can't help but agree with that statement. There's just so few weaknesses in what he does. And like you said, all three phases. If he's in coverage, he's about as good as it gets in terms of movement skills, in terms of matching up man-to-man, in terms of feeling for zone, that sort of thing. He's fantastic at it. Really, like, no real flaws I can pick out. It's here and there. There's some plays where he gets beaten, obviously, but that's everybody at linebacker. So fantastic in that regard. In the run game, he can take on blocks. He can go sideline to sideline. He understands run concepts. He's not, stuck in mud there at the second level. He's flowing in the right direction. Fantastic at that. And then as a blitzer, 4 sacks, 12 hits last year, dominates. If he gets one-on-one with a running back, he wins almost 100% of the time. So, like you said, there's really nothing he can't do. And so for a guy that does everything well, what are the knocks in this game? What would you poke a hole in besides the shoulder issues, like you mentioned, besides the combine stuff? What parts of his game are you say, this is where I want to see him improve?
I would say probably the number one thing would be taking on blocks head on. I don't know that he's very consistent in that. And then when you compound on top of that there is a history with the shoulder issue, that right there can be a concern to me. Typically, he's so instinctual. He's flown to the ball so quickly. He's able to beat blockers to the point of attack and avoid them. But in terms of straight ability to take on and shed, he's not going to be as good as a guy like Zach Cunningham out of Vanderbilt.
Yeah, when you're a 6 foot tall linebacker, that's just part of the nature of it. He has long arms for his size. I think he has 32 plus inch arms, which is pretty good for a guy at 6 feet. And he does use his leverage well. He'll get underneath an offensive lineman's pads, but you're just going to have to accept that that's not going to be, he's not going to be a perfect, shed offensive lineman at second level. But like you said, with his instincts, with how quick he is, he doesn't always need to take on blocks to make plays. So I agree there. The one thing I saw that isn't even really a knock on him, but is just kind of comes with the territory of how aggressive and how physical he is, that he missed a ton of tackles last year. I think he had 16 missed tackles on around 110 or so attempts, which is a pretty high rate. Missed some tackles on quarterbacks, fly into them, missed some tackles at second level, all over the place. That comes with the territory of being a smaller linebacker. That also comes with, like I said, his aggressiveness. So that's not even really a concern to me. It's just something that you're going to have to accept with a guy who plays as hard as he does, I think.
And I think when you're a guy like him and is so instinctual that you're constantly around the ball, regardless of your tackling ability or technique, just naturally you're going to miss more just because of the pure volume factor of it. I like the fact that also you can look at his stats and kind of have a feeling of how he was used at Alabama. When you look at what he did this past year, besides the run game, which he was our number 1 run stopper in the country.
Highest overall grade, period, in the country.
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes. So. 4 sacks, 12 hits. So 16 times he hit the quarterback on pass rushes. He had 2 passes defended. The year prior, that went down to 8, but his passes defended went up from 2 to 7. So it's clear last year they had him more in coverage, and obviously he excelled in that regard last year. And this year they brought him on the blitz more. I can't tell you off the top of my head how many of those might have been unblocked. I would assume because of scheme, it's likely that there are quite a few. But at the same time, I think it's pretty clear on film that he's very competent in both phases.
One other big concern I have, and this just is every Alabama linebacker, any Alabama player outside the D-line, is how stacked that D-line is, how favorable looks you get as a linebacker. Basically, you're not worried about double teams coming up into your face as an Alabama linebacker. That just doesn't happen at Alabama. With how talented, guys like Jonathan Allen, Allen Arts, Alvin Tomlinson in front of you, they're not moving off the line of scrimmage. They're holding their gaps perfectly, play after play after play. So basically, he doesn't even come into his mind. If he plays, like you said, if he goes to San Francisco at number 2, which it's not looking like that's possible anymore with all his off-field issues, but going to somewhere like that where you don't really have a good nose tackle, you don't have defensive ends that are going to hold the line of scrimmage, Eric Armstead's going to end up in your lap. DeForest Buckner is going to be in your lap. Is that something that would be concerning to you? Is that something that you worry about with him at the next level, the fact that he hasn't even seen that yet?
I think that is a concern, especially when you factor in, we've already talked about us questioning his ability to consistently take on blocks, because the fact of the matter is he's going to see more contact at the next level from linemen than he did at Alabama, because as you said, he's just freed up and he's allowed to flow and be aggressive that way. And that's going to have to change just a little bit. I would assume wherever he ends up. So that's certainly a concern as well. Let's kind of talk about just a little bit about what happened at the Combine and what the
give us a breakdown
of that. For those listening and that don't know, welcome to 2017. But apparently during medical checks, and it's important to understand that when you are going to these medical checks, you can be there literally all day. There was a player either this year or last year that spent basically an entire 7-8 hours there, went back to the hotel, got called back for an MRI or something, and ended up there until 3 a.m. So basically his day started at the hospital at 7 a.m., ended at 3 a.m. Mm-hmm. So as
not very pleasant.
No,
they're not pleasant. Is the picture that he's trying to paint.
No, exactly. That being said, apparently he got into some type of argument with one of the hospital staff. Mm-hmm. And it got to the point where it was bad enough to where, not that it came to blows or anything like that, but he actually was removed from the Combine. He was sent home early probably before many of the teams ever met with him, mm-hmm. because usually medical checks is the first thing you do. And certainly before the on-field workout, which is the last thing you do while you're there. Mm-hmm. So that brings in a whole bunch of other questions, obviously, as to, is that a problem beyond this one scenario? Like you said, obviously, that's a stressful situation for anybody. But you are there for the job interview of your lifetime. Yeah. So at some point, you have to know better than that, right?
Mm-hmm. And at the same time, there's a difference between someone just being, for lack of a better word, an asshole, and someone who's going to have their life derailed, or like their career derailed by drug issues, by crime issues. They're not necessarily go hand in hand. Just being a jerk to people in your everyday life doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go out and commit crime. So to me, it's not good, but I wouldn't drop him down my board at all. If he would have ran a 4.8 at the Combine, that would have dropped him way further down, than anything of that nature. So yeah, it's probably about the dumbest thing you can do there, but it's not moving the needle.
Well, he didn't
too much.
He didn't have a positive drug test there. That would be the dumbest thing, which seems to happen every year, though we haven't locally had any leaks on that this year. But I think it's just one of those things where you have to understand, okay, I need to look into it a little further. Maybe talk to some more people at Alabama. Are there issues there? Was it ever a problem in the locker room at all? Mm-hmm. Because he is a middle linebacker. He's expected to make calls. He's really a leader of that defense.
They expect as coaches leading as part of the deal with linebackers.
Yep.
So at the end of the day, though, where do you think it's all said and done, where does he go in this draft?
Unless there are serious issues with the medical that we don't know about yet. Like as we mentioned, he has past history with shoulder issues, so we don't really know where that leads us. Unless there are serious issues with that, I still cannot envision him not going top 15. We just talked about, obviously, his skill set in all three phases. And even though he's an inside linebacker and he's not going to do a ton of pass rush, at some point we have to understand, with this being a passing league, that a linebacker's ability to play well in coverage is super valuable. And at some point we need to start valuing that more. So while inside linebackers typically don't go top 15, top 10, I think everything about his play says that absolutely he warrants that.
Yep. I think I think it'd be crazy if he slipped past New Orleans at 11, and I think it would just be impossible for him to slip past Arizona at 13. If he's on the board there for Arizona at 13, he's the perfect fit for their scheme. That just wouldn't be nuts in my mind. There would have to be, like you said, something more with the medical, something more on the off field, something more with the interviews that we just don't know about, because his on-field play would be a steal at that point for either of those teams. One last question, Josh. If Reuben Foster is not going to succeed, if he flames out in the NFL, why would that be? What in your mind would be the indicator right now that says that leads to him not succeeding in the NFL? Or do you think that's not even an option?
Based purely on on-field play, I just don't see that happening.
Just don't see it?
I really don't. I think he's that high caliber a player. I guess the point you brought up about him being free to everything because of Alabama's line in front of him, and that combined with worries about blockers, maybe that could compound and be a much bigger issue than we're ready for. But outside of injury, outside of his shoulder just blowing up and him not being able to medically continue, I think he's going to be a great NFL player.
I am 100% on board. He and Myles Garrett, to me, closest thing to locks in this class. I just think there's nothing, like you said, there's nothing to suggest that he won't succeed in the NFL. So that's it for us. Make sure to tune into PFF for all of our podcast shorts. Have a good one.